This Sustainable Life, Biodiversity and Conservation. This is Michèle Watson. Today our guest is Tony Frost. Tony Frost is a fifth-generation South African. He studied at the Universities of Natal, Cape Town, South Africa, and Wits. He's a keen photographer, a private pilot, and is passionate about the natural heritage of our planet and particularly of South Africa. He founded his own company, Sirocco Strategic Management, in 1997 to specialize in assisting organizations to design and implement their strategies. Sirocco has a strong focus on integrated sustainability. Tony has delivered presentations at conferences and facilitated workshops, both locally and internationally, on the subject of leadership, governance, and strategies in business, and in particular, the importance of people in making these work. He uses the invaluable lessons of our natural heritage to bring these presentations alive, to illustrate the points made, to emphasize the critical state of our planet. He applies these same principles in his coaching assignments, both individual and collective. After spending about 5 years in a board-level marketing position, he worked at top level as Human Resources Director for 20 years and has served on various boards in various capacities. Just to mention a couple. He was a member of the Ministry of Environmental Affairs Advisory Forum and was chair of the Marine and Oceans Committee. He was a member of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange Sustainability Index Advisory Committee. He was a member of the National Business Initiative Sustainable Futures Advisory Board. He was a member of the Percy Fitzpatrick Institute of African Ornithology Advisory Board and chair of the Southern African Wildlife College. He was a member of the board of the South African National Biodiversity Institute and chair of its Governance and Strategy Committee. Currently, other than leading his own company, Sirocco Strategic Management, he is also an advisory board member of the Global Change Institute of the University of the Witwatersrand and a member of the faculty of the African Leadership University in Kigali, Rwanda, focusing on conservation leadership. He has published many articles, as well as 2 books on the subject of organizations and leadership entitled After the Rain and Flight at Dawn. He has new books in the pipeline, writes regular columns on leadership issues for various publications, and regularly talks on these topics on radio. We were busy talking about his latest book, Flight at Dawn, when I started this recording. Here is the rest of our conversation.
What would you like to know about the book?
Maybe first, what prompted you to write the book?
Okay, that's a good question. I was speaking at a conference in Chicago, and at the end of the conference, and whenever I speak about whatever topics I'm on, I use the natural heritage to illustrate the points I'm trying to make, because we can learn so much from nature. And because we've become completely disconnected from nature as urban dwellers, they did a survey a couple of years ago in the leafy northern suburbs of Johannesburg amongst primary school children, and they asked them, one of the questions they asked them, so where does milk come from? And the people said, the kids said, yeah, from the supermarket or from the fridge or from the bottle. Then no cow ever appeared in a conversation about where milk comes from. That's just a small example of how disconnected we've become. And one of the things that me and my partner do is we take groups of people into Big 5 country and we sleep on the ground. No game drive vehicles, no fences, no tents. We sleep, well, not on the ground, but we sleep with all the other paraphernalia. We sleep on kind of roll-up mattresses. Hikers will know what I'm talking about. And it occurred to me that somehow we need to get into the public debate the fact that nature has a lot to offer in terms of lessons on how to live sustainably.
Yes.
So that was kind of the chairman of my session, it was one of these small American, he told me it was a small American conference, only 7,000 delegates. Anyway, chairman of my session said to me, Tony, is this in a book? So I said, no. He said, well, you should put it in a book. So on my flight back to South Africa in my little Cyan handheld computer, I started to type this book. And when I'd finished typing it, I thought to myself, this is really boring. So then I changed my mind. And instead of writing a kind of reference book, I wrote a semi-fiction, semi-novel book about the lessons that nature can teach us. So that's the first book.
Yes.
And that was, it was called After the Rain. And rain is really important everywhere in the world, but in Africa it is critically important, especially Northern Africa and Southern Africa. And so when the rain comes, the community knows that life is going to change. When the rain stays away, the community knows they are on desperate straits. So that was that book, and it had some wonderful lessons in, I think. It was a success, however you want to measure it. And it's a very self-indulgent thing, writing a book. For me anyway, I wrote the book for me. And then I handed it to the publishers, and then the book was for other people. It's quite a thing to walk into a bookshop and you see your book, stacked. Quite exciting. And then the publisher said to me, this book needs a sequel because you haven't covered everything. You haven't kind of connected the lessons in the bush with everyday life. Okay. And so the second book, this one that I showed you just now, Flight at Dawn, endeavors to do that more directly. So, the essence of the story is me and my two sons, that time I was still flying. We flew off into close to the Kruger Park, landed on a private landing strip, nice gravel one with, zebra and wildebeest walking around on the strip. You had to buzz them off. We landed, and then the adventure began. It's an adventure of life. What does life actually teach us? And particularly, what does the nature around us teach us about how to live our lives better? In a nutshell, that's the story.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to read it.
I'll send it to you. If you send me your address, I'll
I was actually also curious about your time at the World Wildlife Fund, or if I understand right, it's now called Worldwide Fund for Animals. It's changed its title.
Worldwide Fund for Nature.
Yes, right.
Started its life as the World Wildlife Fund. And some years down the road, the powers that be at the time in WWF realized that actually wildlife can't survive, kind of in a vacuum.
Yes.
Wildlife actually needs a habitat. Like we also need a habitat. We need the planet. And wildlife actually needs a healthy habitat in order for it to survive. And the biggest threat to species other than humans, or maybe also to humans, but certainly to other species, is habitat encroachment driven by human behavior.
Yes.
So at that point, the powers that be, the board of WWF, decided that World Wildlife Fund proposes that we're protecting only wildlife. And actually the most threatened species, although we would never like to admit it, are humans. So let's change the name from World Wildlife to the Worldwide Fund for Nature, nature upon which us humans 100% depend.
Yes, and most people are not aware.
Yeah, that's why the name changed to Worldwide Fund for Nature. Because nature is not, it's not kind of stuck in one country. The air we breathe moves around the planet. The rain that rains moves around the planet. The wind that blows moves around the seas surround 2/3 of the planet is sea. It surrounds all the land masses. And that sea is constantly moving. So Worldwide Fund for Nature implies that nature is everywhere and we are dependent on it wherever we may live.
No, it's a good positive shift, I guess. It was time to wake up a little bit.
Positive shift. Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, and it's logical because none of us live in a cocoon. I was about to say that especially people in the north think they live in a nice, safe, protected cocoon from the rest of the, south, the undeveloped south. We in the south have a different view of the people and the politics of the north. But we won't, that's not what our discussion is about, so we'll keep it to nature.
Well, I guess you could say that in the north it's more industrialized, so the north is actually polluting more than the south is.
Yeah, Michelle, if you look at a candle, the pretty part is at the top, and it's a sharp point.
Yes.
And nobody told the world that the north is actually at the top. People who went exploring from the north, and the planet also doesn't know that the north is the north. The people who went exploring from the north, the Vasco da Gamas and Columbuses and all the other folks, decided that the south was at the bottom and the north was at the top. Actually, it's the other way around, because the candle has a sharp point. And so if you turn the world the right way up, the sharp points are South America, South Africa, and let's call them the southernmost points of Australia and New Zealand. And the rest is the sludge upon which the beautiful parts stand.
Yeah, you've got a point. Well, yeah, there are pretty beautiful parts in Russia. I mean, look, there's beautiful parts everywhere, but no, I know you're pulling my leg as well.
No, but I think the actual point is this. The reality is that we are all dependent upon each other.
Yes.
And one thing that this COVID epidemic has taught us is no single country, doesn't matter how rich they are, can fight this on their own. Yes. The only way to deal with the COVID epidemic is to do it together and collaboratively. And I think the world has learned a very big lesson from this pandemic that was divined or sent or occurred. It was sent to us humans, because as far as I know, no animals have got COVID yet. It was sent to us humans to remind us that the only way we're going to survive is by working together. The only way we're going to protect nature is by doing it together.
Yeah, it's collaboration, not competition.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
I was just wondering because, well, it is a podcast about biodiversity, and since you're very knowledgeable on that subject, how about reminding people about the real meaning of biodiversity, what it actually is all about?
Yeah. There's quite a I don't know whether it's publicized, but quite a well-known saying that if a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, there will be a typhoon in Japan.
Yes.
Basically, the concept of biodiversity is about the interconnectedness of everything. So, if you start to eliminate species, you're actually eliminating links in the chain, if you like, the chain of life.
Yes.
That's why it's so important. I mean, we've already eliminated since up to by 1970, we've already eliminated 70% of the world's vertebrate mammals with spines.
Yeah, that's sad.
And and who knows how many other things, invertebrates, plants, we have gone extinct because we are taking out these links in the chain. And the sooner we begin to realize it, that's why I started off our discussion with our link to nature. We become such urban dwellers. Even a little semi-developed country like South Africa is 70% urbanized. So people in the cities, they depend on the supermarkets and the manufacturers and the wholesalers to deliver food. They don't grow their own food. They're not dependent on nature. You switch on a tap in most places, some not so good in some places. Switch on a tap, water runs. People have no concept where that water comes from. Very few people I suppose everybody realizes that we need rain, especially if there's a drought.
Yes.
Then we realize, we better have some rain. Better have some rain. But if the rain happens on a reasonably consistent basis, you switch on the tap, you don't think about rain. You don't think about conserving water. So our connectedness is gone, and biodiversity is about the absolute criticality of the connectedness of everything on our planet.
I was wondering because I remember reading that you were fundraising. You had a fundraising cycle, if I remember well, for education. Does that also include nature awareness, or like do you have any solutions from all your different interests and life work experience about how to bring that connectedness back to people, back to humans? Long question, sorry.
No, that is an extremely good question, you know, and it's one that I wrestle with like all the time, and that's why we take leaders into the bush, into big five country, and we take their mobile phones away from them and their watches away from them, so they're completely disconnected and they have none of their regular framework of reference to say, okay, well, it's afternoon now, you know, or it's midnight,
yes,
or it's tea time, you know, or it's lunchtime. Oh, we better go to work. It's 7:45. You know? So we take all that stuff away from them. And the purpose behind it is to actually get them to realize that you don't need that stuff. You can still tell the time. You know, the sun comes up. When morning starts, the sun comes up. And when the day ends, the sun goes down. So you've got some fairly clear indicators of whether it's night or day. And you know, we cook for ourselves, we look after ourselves, we keep each other safe. And you know, when we ask people at the end of one of these times in the bush, we say to them, what was the most meaningful thing for you? You know, you'd normally expect that people that were, before they arrived, they were walking on the streets of Amsterdam or Tokyo or wherever, or South Africa somewhere. You'd expect them to say, it was amazing to see those white rhino close up. Or wasn't it amazing that we had the privilege of coming across a lion kill like 5 meters away? You'd expect them to say that, I think. Yes. But 40% of people don't talk about that stuff when we ask them, what is the most meaningful thing for you? 40% of them say night watch, standing watch at night. So we can't take, the law doesn't allow us to take more than 8 people. Sometimes we get special permission for maybe 10, but let's say around 8 people. And we say to them, listen, you folks have got to do night watch. And that's kind of like a shock for them to start with. And then we say, you're going to do night watch by yourself, not buddy, one at a time. and by the way, this is a really crucially important part of our journey here, because the other 8 or 9 people that are there in their sleeping bags won't go to sleep if they think you're not doing your job.
Right.
And neither will you go to sleep if you think the person who's doing night watch after you is not doing his or her job. So we try and help people to understand the interconnectedness of everything we do, everything that we do as a consequence. So if we don't recycle, if we don't consciously avoid using stuff, because they often talk about recycling. We start, recycling, recycle. The first step in that continuum is avoid. If you don't have to use something, don't. The second thing is, if you do have to use something that doesn't have to be recycled, but can be reused. So avoid, reuse, then recycle. So we try and help people to understand the connectedness of our actions on the environment around us. And so you asked the question about the cycle tour. So the cycle tour is largely about raising funds to give talented kids, and the noise in the background is the rain pouring down, by the way, to give talented kids a chance at a decent education. And we're working with a growing number of schools, and a decent education, I think, is gradually beginning to be understood, is one that includes how do we ensure the sustainability of our planet.
So it is being included.
Yeah, because if the kids don't get it, then the future is at really big risk. Because I have 3 kids, and I'm now they're all off my hands and they're earning their own money and so on. But I am very conscious of the fact that the kids control what parents focus on. The kids do. I want to be an athlete. So father says, okay, well, what must I do? How can I help you be an athlete? Or the daughter says, I want to be a swimmer. And you say, okay, so how can we help you to be a swimmer? Or I want to be a doctor. So the family focus is on the needs of the kids. So the kids say, listen, we need to actually protect the planet for us, because we've still got some years to live, more than you have. Then the pressure changes. I'll never forget I think it was my older son said to me, hey, Dad, I've got more years ahead of me than you. So can we talk about a few things? So, kids are aware of the fact, kids are very aware of the fact that they have to ensure what the world looks like when they get there. And one of the things that we've sparked with this cycle tour from Johannesburg to Queenstown, to 850 kilometers in metric terms, 500 miles in imperial terms. One of the things that we spark is the teaching of critical thinking skills, not just absorbing information.
Yes.
Critically assessing what you're hearing, whether it is valid, and how well researched is the stuff that I'm hearing. And in the age of social media, that skill becomes super critically important. Because social media is full of nonsense.
And it gets recycled and regurgitated, and the more often people see it, they end up believing it.
False news is big. There are people spreading all sorts of stuff about governments of the world and rich individuals, bought shares into vaccine manufacturers, and they are installing little bots inside the vaccine that can control us and fill them with all sorts of information. Like conspiracy stories, and you say, goodness gracious me, this is worse than Star Wars. And it gets spread around. And then some people are, I'm not going to go and have a vaccination because then the government controls me even more than they're controlling me now. So we're trying to help the kids in our modest way, those kids that are at schools that are part of this process, to think critically and to give them the skills to think critically. And Mr. Socrates, who lived quite a long time ago in that little island that's burning up with fires at the moment, he created a very, very powerful system of teaching people. The Socratic method doesn't supply answers, it supplies questions.
And the quality of your life is linked to the quality of the questions you ask yourself.
Exactly. So, yeah. And there's a direct connection to everything that we've been talking about. Because if you don't ask a question about, so what happens if it doesn't rain, you won't get the connection. You just say the tap doesn't work. And then, so the tap doesn't work, we must phone the municipality and tell them the tap doesn't work. And the municipality says we've got no water. Why not? It's your responsibility to give us water. So now we're going to protest because you're not doing your job. Well, it doesn't rain. So critical thinking skills, especially for the kids, it should be compulsory. In fact, they should scrap all curricula around the world and teach only critical thinking from age 4 until whenever.
Yeah, I often thought the schooling system teaches, there's so much head knowledge, information, yet how much of the really, really useful things that we need in order to live a healthy, happy life is actually not taught at school. And it's sad because simple, basic things like how to take care of your own health in your body, kids leave school and people live their whole lives and they're absolutely clueless at how their own body functions. That's the only thing that, you breathe and live with until your last breath, and you're ignorant about it. And you're ignorant about biodiversity and interconnectedness, but that's the really important stuff, and it's not taught at school. Well, maybe now it is, hopefully.
Absolutely, Michelle. You know, the thing is, if you say to people you've got more bacteria in your stomach than you've got cells in your brain, they say, what? And you say, think about this. Where does the happiness drugs, dopamine and serotonin, come from? They say, no, brain. No. 80% is produced in the gut. And the gut sends a messenger up to the brain to say, we're happy now. So, you know, even at a micro level, natural interconnectedness is critical for our own personal survival. If we don't look after what goes into our stomach, we're not looking after the way we live. It's as simple as that. And probably look after what goes into our stomach more effectively, it'll have a really positive effect on our human impact on the world. Because most of us eat far too much and eat far too much of the wrong stuff.
Yeah, I like the old advice that if it doesn't grow in the field, you shouldn't put it in your mouth.
No, I think that's true. And I think I'd add one little phrase to that. If you can't see the stuff that's going to go into your mouth growing in the field, then don't put it in your mouth. Because if we import avocado pears from Spain into South Africa, which produces 80% of the world's avocado pears, what are we actually doing here?
Yeah, that's a bit sad.
That should be a crime against humanity. They should be in The Hague being charged with the crime. Those guys.
Yeah, I see we think alike.
And then you will probably find that we export avocado pears to Spain as well. So they pass in midair. South African avo is going to Spain. Spain avo is coming to South Africa. Oh, please. It's just beyond logic. There's no way you can explain it or understand it. It's just stupid.
No, like you say, if you don't see it, well, there are more and more people who buy in season and buy within 50 kilometers of where they live. But it's slow growing. It would be nice to be able to increase that.
Our little environment where we live on a little farm close to the Lanseria International Airport near Johannesburg. There's a deli there called the Culinary Table. Marvelous place. If you ever come to South Africa and you don't go to culinary, you're depriving yourself of one of the world's wonders. And they serve only locally grown produce. And that includes meat and veggies and fruit. And you can sit there on their patio and look at the stuff growing. And you say, oh, I think I'd like some lettuce. They go and fetch you lettuce from the garden, you know, and salad. So I agree with you. There is growing awareness around the world. And it's not that we're fighting a losing battle. I think we're fighting a battle that's on the cusp of being won. But there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done. There are too many people who can't make the connection between what they put in their mouth out of some tin that has been manufactured and filled with sugar and E33 and M46 and MCG and all sorts of other chemical stuff that produces a byproduct of Sasol or Exxon or whoever, and we put it in our mouths and we wonder why our livers can't cope or our kidneys give up the ghost.
Yeah.
Well, we are filling those things with poison. We're filling our bodies with poison. So, of course, if you poison the body, it dies.
What do you think would be the quickest way of changing that? I mean, we know how to change it. We know what needs to be done in a way, but like, what would be the difference that makes a difference so that the awareness grows exponentially in a more accelerated way?
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at the possible answers that one could give, you know, like from as bizarre as, say, let's just get rid of everybody in the world except a small group of people to breed with.
I think that's not socially acceptable.
And create a whole brand new set of rules beyond which they cannot go. So that's from that level of bizarre to something bit more reasonable. You know, I don't think there is a quick solution. If there was a quick solution, for example, when the first scientifically reviewed scientific journal article, appeared in a peer-reviewed journal on climate change? What's your guess?
Oh, before the 1970s, and it was ignored.
Yeah, you're right. Before 1970. How does 1836 sound to you?
Yeah, that's really sad.
1836, the first scientific article on climate change. It took a failed politician who was good at communications to make the world aware. His name was Al Gore.
Yes.
And he produced a movie called The Inconvenient Truth. And the world suddenly sat up and said, sure, this is something that's going to affect all of us. So these things are not working. What do we need to do to change this scenario? And focus on what we need to do rather than what, saying, oh, well, we can do nothing, it's up at government level. And I think that's that is the biggest impediment to getting stuff done, is because climate change is so big for most people. And say, well, what can I do? It's such a big thing. It affects everybody, We've got Eskom that produces, that's our power utility in South Africa. Eskom produces all our power. What can we do about Eskom? And it's not working so well at the moment either. Well, you can do very little about Eskom. I mean, you pay the bills, but what can you do where you are? Well, there are a lot of things you can do. You can, for example, it will cost you nothing to switch off your geyser for hot water and only switch it on for an hour or an hour and a half a day. You don't have to have the geyser heating up water for 24 hours a day. And for most working people, they're only at home. They're not at home during the day. So they don't need hot water. And most geysers are insulated. So the water, if it's hot in the morning, will still be hot in the evening. So switch off your geyser. Switch off your geyser. You switch it on for an hour and a half before you need it. You will have hot water. And when you finish doing whatever you do, switch it off again. Small things. All of us, every single person on this planet. If you are a biped and you've got a brain and you stand upright, which means you're a human, switch off your geyser. We can all do something. It's not a situation where, we must wait for government or big business or blah, blah, blah. Yes, we can do those things. We must lobby them, and we must shout at our members of parliament and our politicians, and we must make a noise about it. And we need to. And we need to get the media on side. And we need to use social media. We need to teach our kids to say, guys, this is our planet. We better have a strike at home. Let's have a protest at home so our parents understand this is important to us as well. If every kid younger than 17 ran a protest at home, that would be the quick way of solving things. Because there are more young people than there are old people in the world at the moment.
Yeah, that would be a good thing. I often thought the real revolution should be a grassroots one. If we wait for governments to act, it will always be too late, because it's like trying to change the direction of a tanker. You can't wait for that. So if each individual realizes that it is in their power to take action and stop, like you said, stop using instead of blaming the government that there's not enough power, well, try and find a way to use less power in your daily life.
So here's a question for you. I know it's your podcast and you're the person who's supposed to ask me questions. And that's good. But I'm going to ask you one question.
Yes.
If you look at the history of revolutions around the world, doesn't matter what country or in what era, where does the revolution start? Who starts a revolution?
Yeah, the people.
It's certainly not the president, the king, or the monarch. They don't start revolutions. Revolutions are started by the middle class, by the middle management of countries.
Okay.
It's middle class people that start revolutions. And they're also the people that pay taxes. The top guys suck up the taxes, the middle guys pay the taxes, and the guys at the bottom depend on the taxes. That's how it works.
Mm.
So the middle classes need to be targeted and say, guys, two things. You need to demand what is right for you and your children. Number one. Number two, be very aware where your taxes are being spent. And make sure that whoever represents you in the government is aware of your feelings about those taxes, where they're being spent or not spent. And more importantly, make them aware where you want that money to be spent. We're very bad at doing that. And I'm not talking just about South Africa. From my travels around the world, that's a global issue. Some countries are better than others, but globally it's an issue. We're very laissez-faire. We only really start to complain and get involved when things go horribly wrong. And oftentimes then it's too late. So, Michèle, there's no simple answer and there's no quick answer. And it's not up to government, because government will not change it. Government is invested in maintaining the status quo. That's what governments do. They want the status quo. Why would they want to change it? Because they're dependent on the status quo for their salaries. They definitely do not want things to change. Why would they want things to change? No, all let's call them democratic countries, and certainly dictatorships do not want things to change. So what's left? Democracy, democratic governments do not want things to change. Dictators don't want things to change. So what other countries are there? You're either in a dictatorship or you're in a democracy. And the rulers of those countries don't want change. They don't. So who's going to make the change happen? And if you want an answer, have a look at what's happening in Afghanistan.
Yeah, let's not go there. Let's keep it to biodiversity.
I'm not suggesting that kind of revolution. I'm not suggesting that. But it's not for someone else. You and I are in the middle class.
Yes.
It's us that have to make this change happen. We pay the taxes. We support the people who can't pay taxes. And we support the people who occupy the big positions and draw salaries from our taxes. It's us in the middle class that have to make this noise. So what you're doing here, I don't think you, well, maybe you do. Maybe you're doing it because you do realize. But when you asked me, when I was driving back from my meeting in Rustenburg and we had that chat and I was in the car and you were sitting in your lazy boy in Switzerland, I thought to myself, I wonder if Michèle fully realizes how important these podcasts are. Because if you can get more people doing what you're doing because of what you're doing, yes, you'll be part of the process of making a change happen.
No, I do realize we have to.
It's critical.
Raise awareness, definitely, and ideally do it in a viral way.
Michèle, it's not about. Yes, it is about raising awareness. You talked earlier about our kids. They're flooded with information. Information is useless unless you use it. It's data. It's like a book in the library. If it's never taken out, it's just occupying space. And I'm afraid much information is like that. Much information is like that. It occupies space, but it's not useful. It becomes useful when it gets used. So awareness is important, but it's just taking space. What is even more important, Michèle, is to do what you're planning to do, is to say to people, what are you going to commit to do? What is your commitment to making change happen? That's the important part, because then you use what you know to make a change happen, or make changes happen even better, rather than just one change.
Well, I believe it's not just about commitment and taking action. I think what people need to do is, when I say awareness, it's actually more of helping people have a change of perspective, a paradigm change. Like, for example, realizing that taking action is actually not a chore. It's not something unpleasant. It's something that can bring you joy. So that's what actually needs to be shown. Like you were saying, when you took people out on your camps in the wilderness, I'm quite sure that at the end of it, they didn't say, "Oh, we missed our computers terribly and we had an awful time." I'm very sure they came back from the camp feeling extremely alive and joyful and, yeah, changed, but in a positive way.
I mean, I hope you're right. I believe that you are. In the 20 odd years that we've been doing this, we've only had one person. I appreciate that I went and I benefited from it, but I won't do that again. Only one person.
Okay.
And we had the management board of a big, powerful, I'm not going to mention names because it's not really important, but a big, powerful Scandinavian company. And the managing director was somewhat skeptical about having his words. Having an unplanned holiday safari was his words. But he was a good guy. I mean, I really enjoyed him, and he is a very clever engineer. And he went along with it. He said, "Okay, let's try it. I mean, we've got nothing to lose, and it's probably the break will be good for my men." Actually, there was one woman, but he did say my men. Anyway, so we went in the bush, and I'm not going to go through the whole process because we work out a system of playing with people's heads while they're there, because it's important. If you don't get inside people, then no change is going to happen.
Yes.
It just becomes a pleasant memory. So in the last day, we do a really special thing, and I've seen more than 50% of the people on that last day are moved to tears by their experience.
Oh.
And that included this big, seriously minded, very rational engineer, MD of this big company. And he stood there with tears rolling down his cheeks. He's a big guy, 6'5", with his Scandinavian blonde hair, lovely man. Tears running down his cheeks, he said to me, "I never realized how powerful nature is, and how this has just worked. It's worked into my team in a way that I never would have expected." And we had these team were like from all over the world, Australia, America, obviously Europe, one South African. And I use this as an example. It's nice to know stuff. And most people are kind of intuitively acquisitive to one degree or another, but it's much more important to accept the fact that change is going to happen with or without us.
Yes.
And perhaps better to be engaged with and to be, if possible, architects of the change, but certainly involved and engaged in making it happen. That's why asking people for commitment, I think that's a good move. It's a good move. Because change doesn't happen because it's a good idea. It was a good idea in 1836 that human beings would start to change their behavior. It's taken us a long time to realize that the time is running out now.
Yeah, it definitely is. All the stats are telling us that it's very getting very close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the issue is how do we give people information, because the information is freely available. You can go on your smartphone and Dr. Google knows everything about everything. There's nothing he doesn't know everything about. So the information is available, not about information. It's about two things: getting people to commit to change. And the second thing, and maybe even more important, is to embrace the change as being an adventure that will show me a new way of living.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, inviting you at your option to take a commitment to live sustainably in a new way. What memories do you have? What does it actually mean to you emotionally?
Oh, nature.
Nature, yes.
Nature means everything to me. It means everything can't survive without nature. It's not possible to survive without nature.
So there's not one particular feeling, emotion that it brings out when you think of okay, let's say when you think of going out in the bush again. Well, what's the first feeling that comes up to you?
You know, I'm sitting here looking out of my sister's kitchen window, and I can hear the birds, and I can see the rain or the rain clouds, and I know that just over the horizon there is nature, the African bush. It's there. You can see it.
Yeah, I can hear it. I can hear the birds.
But that's, if you want me to give you one example of what really talks to me, is to go up the side of the mountain when it's still dark.
Mm.
Sit in a quiet space under a tree, a marula tree, or any kind of tree. But sit in a quiet space under a tree. Contemplate the wonder of being able to be alive in this little speck of dust that tumbles through space with no help from us. And to realize that this little speck of dust that we live on and depend on cannot even be seen from the middle of our galaxy, because we sit at the edge of the Milky Way, which is most of our galaxy. And to realize that to travel across our galaxy, it takes 100,000 light years. And it's one of the smaller galaxies amongst a community of somewhere between 140 and 200 billion galaxies. And to think about the amazing privilege we have of being able to occupy this space and to live well and to enjoy life and to see life as an adventure every day. I mean, what can be more awesome than that? And then you sit there and you wait and you see the sun, the sky starting to gray. And you contemplate the fact, so what would happen if the sun didn't come up today? And you realize that life on Earth would end very abruptly and quite quickly because we'd freeze.
Mm.
And then you see the sun just tip its one eyebrow over the horizon and send its amazing fingerlings of light and warmth onto our planet. And if you think about it, photosynthesis cannot happen without the sun. So everything that we eat depends on that sun coming up every day. And so I sit there in awe and wonder, and often, as I am now, moved to tears. Because how can a person ordain something like this for people like us? We have no respect and show no concern for this amazing privilege that we've been given without even asking for it. We didn't ask for it. It was just given to us as a most generous gift that anybody could possibly ask for. I mean, how can you possibly go and say, I want to have life? We don't fully appreciate the power of nature. So you asked me for one thing, you got it. Sunrise. It's the symbol of hope. It's a symbol of a new era. It's a symbol of opportunity. It's a symbol of love. It's the connection between yesterday and tomorrow. It's a symbol of so many things upon which we depend for our lives. Amen.
That was very powerful.
Yeah, nature is not important. You know, if you ask me if nature is important, Michèle, I'd say no, it's not important. It's essential. If there's no nature, then what do we actually have? We've got nothing. Nothing. We're dead. We're dead. There's no alternative. If we don't have nature, we're dead. It's like a simple equation, which you learn in your first almost your first day at school. 1 + 1 = 2. No nature, dead. Nature, life. It's like that.
Yeah, that should be taught.
It's simple. It's not a long and complicated equation. And the more complicated part about that is, how do we continue to ensure the interconnectedness of everything so that it works? Because we're busy messing with those genetic links that make nature. Shipping avocados from Spain to South Africa, and they pass another plane shipping avocados from South Africa to Spain. It's mind-bogglingly criminal. And I'm not saying that we do ship avocados to Spain, but I know we ship lots of avocados north.
No, well, I do know here in Switzerland, I've eaten South African grapes and South African all kinds of fruit. Vegetables maybe less, but we have grapes here. If you just wait until this season, you could just have Swiss grapes in Switzerland.
There's a German entrepreneur. He owns big chunks of the Namibian landscape, and he grows table grapes there. He's got his own landing strip, and he flies in refrigerated Boeings 737s every night and picks up table grapes and takes them back to Germany.
Yeah.
How can that be? I mean, he's creating a lot of jobs, and I think that's all wonderful, and he's growing food. I'm just honest to know that it's all that sustainable.
No, I don't think it is. Well, if I were to invite you to take, at your option, obviously, to take a new sustainable action, behavior into your life, something that you're not already doing yourself now, so something new, something that you're doing yourself, so you can't outsource it or delegate it. You can involve other people, but you have to partake. You've got to do it yourself. Something that's also measurable, tangible, and that's time-based. I mean, I'm not asking you to commit to it forever. That will be up to you. But for a certain amount of time, is there anything that comes up to your mind? I mean, especially based on how important the environment, nature is to you. Well, not important, essential and vital.
Yeah.
Is there anything?
Look, Michelle, I'm not going to make a commitment to do something new, but what I am going to make a commitment to do is to expand what we are already doing with schools, and to do it consciously and with intent. Because some of the schools we work with, it's kind of, running around the edges, but it's not core and central. So I think I'm going to make my commitment to you to work hard at getting the idea of the criticality of nature core and central in the school curriculum. From grade, what we call grade reception, which is 1 year before grade 1. So it's like a reception year, getting kids used to the idea of school. From that level up, that's what I'm going to do. Because I can't make nice long speeches and blah, blah, blah about how important children are, and then I don't do something about it,
Yes.
So I'd like to do that.
Okay. Well, I'd
like to do that. Because it hasn't been a major thrust. But I think my commitment is to actually try and get it core and central.
Well, that's bigger than I was expecting.
Yeah, and the thing is, I'm involved in, I don't know, probably 20 schools. So that's quite a few school kids. Assume that each one of them has, let's say 700, that many of them have more than 1,000, but let's say 700 pupils.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite a few people, quite a few pupils. And I'm led to believe that every person on this planet has a parent.
Yes.
So if there are a few thousand kids, they've got two parents. We need swimmers and receivers to make a child. Those kids nagging their parents can have an impact.
Indeed. Okay, I would like to schedule a second conversation to see any progress. So within, I don't know, 6 months to a year, or how long would you, after how long do you think you might have some kind of result that we could talk about?
You know what I would suggest is, rather than waiting for some kind of result to talk about, just check in once in a while. You know, because I can tell you this is working, that's not working. And the result is, yeah, if we achieve a fabulous result, that's great. But that doesn't help a school in Switzerland. Okay. I actually worked a little bit with the international school in Geneva for a while. So I know a little bit about Switzerland, but that doesn't help a school in Switzerland. What the managers and teachers and educators at a school in Switzerland or Singapore or Chicago or Badalit or wherever, what they want to know is what worked and what didn't work and why. Why did it work? Why didn't it work? So I think a check-in to say, how are you doing? What you're doing? What's working? What's not working will be more instructive. And say, yay, we're fantastic. Every single kid is now writing letters to the president to tell him he's doing a lousy job of looking after nature. But yeah, okay, but how did you get that? No, I stood, I got all the kids in the, let's say, Queenstown. We got them all into a sports stadium. I made an impassioned plea and they all wrote letters. That's what I did. Well, that doesn't help anybody, really. Yeah. You know, sounds like a nice story, but is it feasible? It's not going to be feasible everywhere.
Yes. So we could actually, instead of having 1 second conversation, we could have a regular check-in, as I say, and have a progress report, an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, I'm happy with that, and you can add in other things to talk about. Why is it such a lovely idea to learn to fly? Yeah, I love my flying. I miss it. I mean, flying as a pilot. I don't enjoy sitting in the couch behind the pilot, you know, in the sitting room that we call the cabin, because that's boring. You can sit in a chair at home if you want to, but that's not, to me, that's not flying. That's just going somewhere in someone else's lounge. But I'm being silly now, but we can talk about anything.
Yes.
Anything that I know something about. That's really what I'm trying to say. Getting the same message through to different cultures. That's a really important thing in the world we live in. You know, if you're on the edge of starvation, why would you care about nature? If it's edible, you eat it. You know, and 40% of the world's population live just above the poverty line. So it's a big challenge.
Yeah, it is.
It's an even bigger challenge to spread the wealth. You know, 2% of the world's population owns about 50% of the world's wealth, something like that. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's like the inequity in our world is like the prospect of the next major conflicts being about water, because it's not available. So, you know, there are things that directly affect nature, and maybe we should talk about some of those things. It's not just fossil fuels and not flying anywhere and car curbing emissions and there are other things. It's how does the economy work? What does the economy do to help us look after our planet? At the moment, not a lot. I think there are more and more corporations realizing they have to do something. They're not too sure. You know, I went a few years ago, I went into a major listed company here in South Africa, and the chief executive called me to ask me for some advice. And I just want to plug my computer in before it dies on us. To ask me my advice, and he said, you know, we do these strategy sessions and nothing seems to happen, and blah blah blah. And we're very worried about our the requirements of the triple bottom line because the stock exchange requires it of us. So I said, so what are you doing? Because I've read your sustainability report. All I can see is that you're giving a really nice sum of money to WWF, but that's not you doing something. That's paying someone else to do something. But what are you doing? He said, what do you mean? I said, okay, can you tell me how much paper do you use? He said, I have no idea. I said, how much electricity do you use? He says, I have no idea. My chief financial officer takes care of the accounts. I said, no, that's how much you pay. How much do you use? How much water do you use? I have no idea. I said, how many kilometers do your delivery vehicles travel every year? She said, I don't know. I said, how many kilometers do your staff travel every year getting to and from work? He said, that's even more indistinct to me. I said, well, you've got a lot of work to do if you want to be a positive contributor to change, to environmental change. And it gets back to your question. I think it was a second and a half earliest question. No, it wasn't quite the first question. And the point is, everybody can do something. People in powerful positions can do a lot more, but their minds are filled with all sorts of other stuff. And we need to get them to focus on stuff that they directly can control. And I love Mr. Schwab, Professor Schwab's idea of stakeholder capitalism, not just capitalism to produce profit for shareholders. What are we actually doing that is positive for all of our stakeholders? And one of the most important of those stakeholders is the environment, because everything we have comes from the environment. So yeah, there's lots to talk about.
And then I was actually thinking, because you mentioned the economy isn't working, and
well, it depends who you talk. For some people, the economy works beautifully. Speak to Mr. Gates, Mr. Buffett, and that guy who's just flown to somewhere, and another guy who's just flown somewhere into space. The economy is going great for them.
But I wasn't talking about them, but I was just thinking. I don't know if you've heard of the idea of the gift economy. It's a term that a gift economy. It's a term that I read recently from she's a botanist, First Nations person. So basically, going back to the old way of seeing of living many hundreds of years ago, where the way of living was not about amassing things. It was not about a growth economy, but it was more about a gift economy. So it just changes the whole relationship with the land, with plants, with even if they were farmers. So if you believe that nature is giving you the gift of the crop, and you give thanks to it, you'll have a different relationship, and you won't take things for granted. You won't say, oh, this is an apple and an apple costs $1, and then that's the end of the relationship and I'm done. If you live in a gift economy, it's the land is gifting you an apple. It's a relationship, so you'll care for the land, because if somebody, like in a family, if somebody gives you something as a gift, you honor the gift, you honor the giver. Whereas in a growth economy, all that relationship, the interconnectedness is lost. So we should rethink the economy and go back to a more gift economy, if that makes any sense to you.
Look, I like the concept, but I'm trying to figure out how you could actually get someone who's living on the 34th floor of an apartment in Manhattan to understand the concept of a gift economy, where I must give thanks to the earth for this delicious asparagus that I bought down the road at the local, wherever they buy the asparagus in Manhattan.
Well, maybe I know in some inner cities they've started creating gardens in public spots.
Yeah, here too. And I think that's great.
So to re-educate people that you can grow your own food.
Yeah, you can, but that's not going to happen for 8 billion people. If you're sitting on the 29th floor of a or 50-story building in Manhattan, where are you going to grow your food? That's the challenge. And I'm not saying it's not a good idea. I think the concept is beautiful. And you should watch a documentary called Kiss the Ground. It's fabulous.
Oh, I've seen it, yes.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, it really, have you seen David Attenborough's thing, A Life Well Lived?
No, I haven't seen that one yet.
He's fine. Basically, he says, I can't remember exactly, but basically he says, my final gift to the planet. You should watch it. Because those two together speak loudly to the topics we've been talking about, Michelle. And I like the idea of a gift economy. I'm just trying to figure out how do you make a nice concept, and it is a nice concept, something that's practically implementable. Because I can so I'll go to one of the big food producers in South Africa and say, listen, you've got to change your thinking. Your marketing's got to become about the gift economy. He's going to say to me, I don't give a gifts.
No, the shop's not going to care, but I mean, starting with the individual, just making them understand that.
I think that's a great idea, but for it to have impact, we've got to give the big producers on board with the idea. How they translate and implement that idea is another long debate. But I think getting the concept in the mind of the big producers is a good idea.
Mm.
Because let's face it, their profits are a gift from nature. They can't produce food unless nature delivers it to them.
Yes.
So I think the concept they will buy into, how they translate that into something that is commercially viable and can result in the delivery of food to the billions of people on the planet, it's another long debate. And I don't know what the answers are. But I'm sure they are. I just don't know where. As I sit here now, it's a logistical nightmare, actually. Maybe you have to, I don't know. I know they've done some amazing stuff, for example, in a place like Detroit, where they've turned abandoned buildings that were utilized by the automotive industry when it abandoned Detroit and turned them into indoor gardens. Brilliant. Floors and floors of indoor farms. Fabulous. So maybe now with COVID and offices being abandoned all over the world because they're never going to go back to them, maybe we should turn them into indoor gardens and an accommodation where people live off the gardens that are in their buildings. Maybe that's an option. I can see some of the big names, the big ego names on the tall buildings in Sandton being taken off those tall buildings because nobody's going to those offices. I've got a friend who works in a company that she's one of the directors. They employ 900 people. The most people I've had there since the start of COVID in 23rd of March last year in South Africa is 90.
Wow.
So they cancel their lease. They don't need an office for 900 when they've got 1/10 of the population turning up for work in offices.
Yeah, I was wondering about what was happening with all that empty space. Meanwhile, there's shanty towns.
Some big ego names are going to be coming off buildings because companies are going to say this is unsustainable. We're paying rentals for empty offices. I've got a client. They had offices in Rosebank. You'll know Rosebank maybe. 250 people. Canned the lease. They've got space now for meetings. So if they have a town hall meeting with all the people, they've got space to have a meeting. And around the meeting space, they've got some cubicles. And they've got another place where they've got hot desks where people come and work if they want to. But they've empowered people to work from home, which has its own challenges. But a lot of good things are happening because they're not charging up fuel to get to work and blah, 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 and time and so on. So I don't know. I think the idea of the gift economy is a good one. So before we talk next time, your job, Madame Watson, s'il vous plaît, is to come up with a solution for making the gift economy a commercially implementable idea.
It's a bit of a tall order.
If you do that, you'll get the Nobel Prize for Peace.
Oh la la.
Ooh la la, madame.
On that very challenging note, is there anything that you would like to say directly to the listeners? Anything that I might have forgotten to ask?
You have to do something about the planet that we live on. Don't think somebody else must do it.
Well, thank you very much, Tony Frost. I've loved having this talk with you today.
It's been a pleasure and a privilege to spend this time with you, Michelle. Thank you for asking.
Well, thank you. And we'll hear from you in our next talk.
Good.
Thanks.
Take care and good luck with your projects. It's vitally important.
Thank you. Thank you.